One question that we often see regarding storytelling is, what are the different storytelling types and formats?
We are often talk about story structures, and there are so many of them. And most common thing we often hear is the hero's arc. So what else do we hear on the story structure? From me, for Japanese, if you grew up in Japan, it's Kisho Tenketsu. It's 4 acts of story structure. Everyone knows if you grew up. So what else do we hear? Tim?
Well, I've been trained by some fantastic people around storytelling, and it turns out it actually goes back to as far as Aristotle, who came up with the 3-act structure. 3 acts, 3 very distinct pieces within the story itself. Act 1 is usually referred to as the exposition, the background information that we need to understand what is happening in the story so that we can follow along in terms of what is happening. It sets the scene of everything that goes on. Act 2 introduces the conflict. The conflict is what really makes the story. And Act 3 is the resolution to that conflict. What I have found is that there is an excellent source on YouTube, and we'll put a link to it in the notes. It's from Kurt Vonnet, who talks about the story curves of the different 3-act structures that generally a lot of stories follow. And he refers to them in a couple of ways. So number 1, he has a format that talks about man in a hole. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a man, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a hole. But the general theme is that somebody who is in a good position falls down on their luck into a bad position and finds their way out of the hole to be back into a better position. And he draws the curve as basically down and back up again. He also has a great story of boy meets girl. Again, doesn't have to be a boy, doesn't have to be a girl, but the concept is the same, that somebody who is in a fairly good position meets someone, they get along, and then something happens in the Act 2. There's struggle within the family, there's strife within the relationship, and will they overcome this and get through it? And as the story comes into Act 3, there is an ending that usually ends in a happy ending, and sometimes it doesn't, but it resolves itself so we understand what the characters have gone through. Finally, he uses the example, and he refers to it as the story that will make you $1 million, because it's the story of Cinderella, where the lead character is not in a good position. They are not in an enjoyable part of their life, and their life actually gets worse from the position that they're in until someone gives them a better means or a way in which to come out of the despair that they are in, only to have that despair taken away from them as part of the conflict or the ending piece of the conflict. Although they don't fall necessarily to the level of which they started out at. They are slightly better than where they were. And as Act 3 continues, they are making their way into, again, a direction that would put them in a better way of their life. So there are many different themes behind this. And underlying these 3 themes and these 3 acts is the hero's journey. This is a very common way in which to tell stories. I think, Oscar, you're very familiar with the hero's journey piece, are you not?
Absolutely. One of the foremost experts in that topic is author Joseph Campbell. And the hero's journey, one great way to describe it is, quite a lot of people have seen, all over the world, have seen the Star Wars movies. And that really encapsulates the hero's journey from George Lucas's story. The whole idea of you have a principal character or some principal characters, and there ends up being some kind of a conflict, And from that arises a quest, and the hero of our story realizes often unwittingly that he or she is following a quest to try to achieve something, whether it's boy meets girl to get the girl, or girl meets boy, whatever it is, trying to save their family from danger, or to find a better job, like in the story Happiness, a movie that has Will Smith in it. And so we follow the hero on their quest. And quite often the hero will encounter some kind of a mentor who, as we know in Star Wars, one great mentor, you have Obi-Wan Kenobi. We also have Yoda. Mm-hmm. Excellent mentors, people that guide our heroes on the quest to find what it is that they're looking for. And all the trials and tribulations that they encounter. A lot of Hollywood scripts are written with this hero's journey in mind. And a lot of great speakers and storytellers really know this technique and how powerful it is to move an audience to emotion, which can later turn into action that we want our audiences to take in a story or in a speech.
That is very interesting. I love Star Wars and Star Trek and those things. Now I am going to introduce a Japanese way. It's actually a hero's journey. Interestingly, it's universal. When it comes to Japan, it's called Kisho Tenketsu, 4 acts, but Kisho is the beginning, introduction of where the hero is, and he is doing something ordinary and facing conflict. Then he goes into the journey, then flip, that twist, surprise happens. Then it's called 10. 10 is our conflicts, and what happens to the hero. We bite nails and so forth. The conflicts can be between him and other samurai, him or other people, or him or structure of the society, or him and inner critic of his. So 3 enemies he might be fighting with. Then Ketsu, the last, introduce everything, usually happy ending or tragically ending, but comes with learning. If he did something good, he's rewarded. If he didn't honor he's supposed to be, he will be facing some another difficulties, journeys, so forth. And that's called Kisho Tenketsu. Also, it is a hero's journey in Japanese way, and it's well known. We've been using for 16th century novels everywhere, but because of the Kisho Tenketsu 4 acts is very short, people can use it in very short poems. Just introduction, elaboration, surprise, and introducing learning. That's just the 4 acts. I often love to follow, make a 4 structure on the paper, and this is the introduction, this is the elaboration, this is the flip, and this is the learning. It's easy to implement. So that's Kisho Tenketsu. And going back to Tim, this is also story structure we are doing, going back to the journey.
I've never heard of that before, but yes. Perhaps, Misako, you and I can sit down and read some Japanese stories together to learn about this version.
Yes. I would love to.